he is definitely an expert in the field of getting positioned and getting seen in top podcasts. So welcome to the stage, Sam Break Gear.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here, and that's a really lovely introduction. Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking your time to share with the SpeakPact audience today, because I am a huge believer in the power of podcasting. And if anybody followed the US elections, the last ones at this recording, we're in 2025, it played a big role. Right. And it can play a big role in your career, especially as you're breaking into your own brand. We represent WPC Speakers Global Agency, my speaker agency. We represent a lot of executives who now want to be speakers. So they've been maybe out there speaking under, let's say, the Microsoft brand or somebody else's brand, and now they're wanting to break out and become their own. I don't see a better way to do that outside of podcasts. So can you just tell me, number one, how you got into this area as a specialty? And am I right?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you now so quickly how I got into this line of work. I arrived in Colombia, Medellin, after leaving the UK and thinking, you know what, I want to find another home. I spent 8 months traveling through the US, down through Central America, Mexico. I traveled by bus and by boat until I got to Colombia. And I really fell in love with the city. I ended up finding a job working at a media company, a media startup there. And I started as a writer, but pretty early on, around 2017, I discovered my first podcast, fell in love with the medium, and I then transitioned in this media company into podcasting, spearheading podcasting within the company. And I produce and host podcasts from 2018 onwards. And in 2021, I went part time with this company and joined a podcast guest booking agency, working as a podcast guest booking specialist. So I had, for 3 years, been receiving podcast pitches for people wanting to be on the shows that I produced and host. And then I switched sides. I spent half my time in that position and the other half pitching clients to get them booked on shows. And in 2023, the agency I was working with changed management. No issues there, but I saw that as a sign to leave and start my own thing. So I left both companies. My wife and I, we started PodWritten together in early 2024. And it's an agency where we specifically focus on helping health and wellness professionals and businesses get booked on top rated shows to boost their audience reach and help them get closer to their business goals and their podcasting goals. And essentially, yeah, that's how we got into this.
So you know the ins and outs of getting in those top 2%, top 1%, top half percent shows. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a top ranking niche versus a top ranking show?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So a top ranking niche, it depends. When you're going after niche shows, you'll find that potentially they're not always as top ranking. So obviously, what you've mentioned there, where you say like top 2%, top 1%, we're talking about Listen Notes, and Listen Notes is a website where you can go check out where a podcast stands within the rankings in the world globally for downloads. And you might find that more niche shows aren't always as high up. So I'll give an example. A client we work with is Karen Fabian. She's a coach for yoga teachers. So she serves a very specific audience of yoga teachers. And we target yoga teaching podcasts, and they have a very small audience. So a lot of these shows are in the top 5%, top 10% of podcasts. And usually we're targeting much higher shows, but they're going right after her audience. And she's seeing clients and leads come in as a result of specifically going after her audience. So top niche shows, you might not necessarily see them having the same ranking. They might not be top 0.5%, top 1%, but that doesn't mean that they're not credible and they're not valuable. And then broader, when we speak more broadly of shows being in the top 1% or top 0.5%, those are going to have a much larger audience, but most likely their audience is going to be more broad and less like focused. And I can definitely get into what the difference is between pitching those shows versus maybe smaller shows like top 5% shows. if that would be of value to the audience. But yeah, let me know.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that because there's an art and a science. Now, of course, our main goal as a speaker agency is to get our clients paid engagements. But to me, podcast appearances are a really great tool to get those paid engagements. And what was really interesting to me is how many speakers are like, I've been on podcasts. They don't do anything for me. It's because they're just getting on any podcast and they have no idea if that podcast even has an audience, and they're not working the show. You're there to serve the host's audience. You're not there to sell your thing. But there's a way to weave in, like we've woven in the fact that you have PodWritten, and somebody who maybe wants some help can seek you out, but you're not overtly selling on my show. So
Mhm.
there's definitely an approach to how you present yourself on other people's shows. And I'll tell you what, those top 1%, those top half percent shows are almost as hard to win as a $20,000 engagement for my client. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to consider when you're going after these top shows is that everyone wants to be on them because they have such incredible reach. So uh, they really do have like thousands of listeners, sometimes tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of listeners. And with the fact that these interviews are often done remotely, it means that people can pitch in from anywhere in the world and shoot their shot at trying to get on these shows, which makes them incredibly competitive. And you have to really stand out from the competition with your pitch, with your credentials, and you have to know exactly how to target these shows in order to get yourself booked. And that might sound discouraging, but honestly, we learn and we've cracked the code ourselves of like what it takes. And anyone can learn these skills. It just takes time and dedication to do the research and implement these tools and techniques. And you don't need the connections there in the first place. You grow the connections. Like every contact that we have at PodWritten is because at one point we were not connected, and then one of our emails landed in their inbox, and then we became connected, and now they're someone that we probably work with regularly to set them up with guests. So yes, these shows are fiercely competitive and they can be hard to get on, but with the right strategy and right approach, it is perfectly reasonable to get yourself booked.
Well, I was sharing with you, we're barely a year old as a podcast, and we've miraculously somehow reached the top 10%. And I absolutely love that. But what was interesting to me is we just, before I would scout out who I wanted on my show and I would reach out. And then all of a sudden, the last several months, we're just getting just piles of requests. So they discovered our ranking before I discovered our ranking. And I didn't know, why we're getting so many of these pitches. And it can get overwhelming because most do about one show a week. Some of them will do two or three, some are daily. Those I think, are pretty rare. So think about that, right? If you're getting 20 pitches per week and you only have one show per week, that mounts up really quickly. What would Now I know you specialize in the well-being industry, but I think that this will translate to any other industry as well. W- what are those guests that you're able to get booked on the most frequently on those really coveted shows versus others? Like, what makes the difference in the pitch or the approach or maybe even the subject matter?
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, you really want to communicate the value that you're going to deliver to the audience, and you want to keep it as brief as possible. So, one of the
Brief,
issues,
yes.
yeah, one of the issues that hosts see a lot is someone will send like pages and pages, and there's this kind of sensation like, I've got so much to talk about, I've got so many things, there's so much about me, like, I want them to know everything, and they just pile it in when really the less that you can say and communicate your value, the better. Because hosts are busy and, like you said, they're inundated with pitches. So it's really about being as concise with your wording as possible and really keeping it short and punchy. And then, like I mentioned before, communicating the value. So, too often people confuse their value with their credentials, and they will say, I've done this, I've graduated from here, or I've got this many like certificates, I'm qualified in this, when honestly a host just wants to know what are the takeaways you're going to deliver to their audience. Like, after their audience has listened to your episode, what new information they're going to come away with that's going to change their life somehow. And as long as you can communicate that really quickly, then definitely that's your focus. That's your number one focus, to make sure that they come away knowing, okay, my audience is going to get this from this. Not only that, but it has to be something that's valuable to their audience. So you have to show research that you understand what their audience is after, you know what they're looking for, and you've probably done that by listening to episodes, you've read their podcast description, you've maybe done some research on the host to see who they speak to. Maybe you've done a deep dive into their social media to understand their tone, their messaging, what would resonate well with them. And you also have to communicate that in the pitch, because one of the issues is that there's this mentality that it's a numbers game. And that's absolutely true. Obviously, the more pitches you send out, every pitch you send is an opportunity to get a booking. But just because you send more pitches, it doesn't always mean that you're going to get more bookings, because podcast hosts are incredibly protective of their audiences. Those that really value their listenership and their show and the content they put out are not going to have anyone that wants to come on their show. They're not going to say yes to anyone. They're going to say yes to those who they really feel are going to add value and who actually care and want to be there. So you need to demonstrate that. Those are the main things. Show evidence that you've done the research, that you understand the show, communicate what value you're going to bring and what the listeners are going to walk away with, and keep it concise. I would say those are the three main points that you should focus on.
I think we like to skip over the basics sometimes, right? And what kills me and gets deleted immediately is a pitch that is obviously from someone who has never even watched one episode or listened to one episode of my show, and they're pitching what they want to pitch. Hey, I'm the greatest person in ABC. I've got all of these accolades. I've done this, and I want to talk about this on my show. They know nothing about my audience. It's completely unrelated. You've just wasted my time. You are on our no list. Right? On the other side, exactly what you said. If someone comes to me and says, I've been listening to your podcast. I love that you empower speakers to scale. I see that I can bring value to your audience. These are some of the outcomes that they can receive by me coming. It's not about them then, it's about what they can do for my audience. And then I'll watch. I mean, I'll at least read the pitch, and then maybe take a second look at them. So I think that that is a big mistake. You nailed it, right? Just throwing out those pitches and seeing what sticks is going to basically get you on the no list. If I feel like you actually do care about my show, you actually do care about my audience, you took it, you care enough where you at least took 30 minutes to listen to one of my episodes and really understand who it is that you're about ready to give value to, that really, you can see right through that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to set you apart right away. It does take a little bit of research. It doesn't have to take a half hour. It could take 20 minutes in all. Check out my LinkedIn, those kinds of things. And then I can see you were right when you said we're protective of our audiences because they trust us. They come to our show because they trust who we put on that show. We believe in and we endorse. And if that person has no clue who it is that they're talking to, why would I choose you to come on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And brief is another great thing. That means you actually understand that I'm busy and you care. And so utilize that paragraph or two paragraphs, whatever it might be, showing the value that you can bring versus putting your resume. Your resume is easy to find. You can always stick your, you know, your one sheet or your press kit on there. You can give links to your digital assets, whatever, but don't spend that precious energy in that short note that if you really want it to be read. So
Hmm.
once you get the gig, or at least the interview for the gig, and it is a gig, it's really a powerful platform. What's nice about podcasts is it's not one and done, it lives on. You then become searchable. And one thing most podcasters do really well is they are optimized for SEO. So when you're looking at getting, let's say you're pitching Porsche Cars North America to go speak, to go train as a corporate trainer, and you have all of your beautiful speaker assets, right? And you give them all your assets, and they're like, "Great, I'm glad you have those." They set them aside and they Google your name because they want to see how much you come up. Well, if you've been on some of those top shows, you could fill out pages. They could just put your name in there, Sam Brake Gear, and you fill up 3 pages versus, he's not really out there. I'm not really seeing him out there. That is another really great tool when it comes to podcasting. Let's say you don't have a big marketing budget or you don't even know how you'd go about marketing. The power of your voice to me is your greatest marketing tool and one of the greatest platforms to get your voice out there, at least, you know, definitely in the beginning, but I don't believe that it ever expires. Um,
Hmm.
it's there for life, basically. The more you do, the more populated and findable you are. And at the end of the day, it's all about being um, findable and a recognized authority. So that's what podcasting does.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Did you have a question about once you land the gig, what then?
What's the etiquette? Yeah.
And so so say like you've joined the show, you're on the show, much like I am now. What's the best etiquette to leave an good impression on the host and the audience? Because like I can definitely speak about that. Yeah. So we mentioned at the beginning that it's important to walk that line between being promotional without being overly salesy. So that's an issue that we sometimes have when our clients first join us. So part of our offering is we do interview training, interview coaching. So we listen over to past interviews they might have had, or we listen to interviews which go live very early on in their time with us. And two things usually happen. Either they are overly promotional, which fortunately doesn't happen too often, where they're just like saying, my course does this, I do this, and they're really not adding much value. They're just talking about themselves. And it doesn't really come off, it doesn't come off good. Let's face it, they're just pushing themselves and they're not giving value. The other end of the spectrum is where they only give value. So they're just there educating people, which is fantastic because the listener's going to walk away with so much knowledge. However, it doesn't position the speaker in a place of authority in the sense that when the listener thinks about this topic, they're not going to think, oh, I can work with this person because they're not really aware of what this person does or how they can work with them. They just have facts about the topic. So what you want to do is perfectly find moments where you can mention yourself and the work that you do without being overly salesy, and also weaving it in naturally where it fits to support your arguments or the points you're trying to make. You might have seen it like earlier on when you were asking me about the difference between top ranked shows and going after smaller shows. And then in that moment, I spoke about a client that we work with and how we get her on niche shows, going after her audience that's brought her clients. Like that's an example of where it works naturally and it fit in. And I saw an opportunity to drop that in. And one of the reasons why it's always good to give examples from your own work is because you're going to have plenty of them. Like you've had lots of opportunities in your life or in your career at least to showcase where this has worked or where something hasn't worked, and you can speak openly about that. And that really reinforces with the listener that like, okay, this person is an expert, this person's had experience, this person's gone through these things and they've got these results either for themselves or the clients that they work with. So I think that's super important in that sense. Another thing is to address the audience. So what I mean by that is use their vocabulary and be very specific. So if I'm on a show, for example, and the show is towards personal trainers, I'm not going to speak broadly. I'm not going to be like, oh, entrepreneurs or business owners can use social media to uh, get more clients and then they can incorporate that with podcasting. I'm going to say something along the lines of like, personal trainers can use social media, or if I'm on a show with health coaches, I'll specifically gear it towards health coaches and be like, health coaches who create this uh, signature course and then go on podcasts. Like I really try and tailor everything that I'm using in my language to the exact audience themselves. And that comes back to doing your research, knowing the show before you get on the call, understanding what's going to resonate with them, and really speaking to them in that sense. And I would also say be conscious of how you articulate yourself, because we find that some clients who are asked a question and they continue talking and the host then doesn't speak for another 10, 15 minutes, that's going to turn listeners off. Like they're going to get bored, they're going to lose track of what you were talking about, and it's going to be hard to keep up with you. So really try and be concise with your wording in that sense.
Such such important insights. I have a quick funny story related to something that you just said. One of my speakers is also a very high up podcaster. I think he's like in the top 2%. He was a keynote at multiple podfests, and he just a dynamic, incredible human being. And he had a guest on his show who was a pretty well known thought leader. He had a new book that came out, and every question he would ask his guests, the guest kept saying, "Oh, it's in the book. It's in the book." Right? He finally actually didn't matter how big of a name this human being was, he actually shut down the show. And
Yeah.
his wasn't live, so he had the ability to do that, but he shut down the show and never um, he just told he had shut it down for a moment and said, "Hey, I really it's supposed to be a conversation. It's supposed to be interactive, not, exactly what you said, where obviously they're there for one thing, and that is to sell you into their thing. And in this case, it was to sell his new book. But all the way through, he was very non-generous and just kept saying, it's in the book. Any question that he asked, don't do that, right?
Yeah, that's a fine story to highlight how not to do things.
Yeah, and needless to say, there was what's neat. We podcasters, we decision makers in this world, we're in very similar organizations. We network together, and we'll share. Hey, Sam was an incredible guest. Bring him on, right? Versus, hey, this guy Mike, you just probably don't even want to waste your time with him. We do
Yeah.
tend to talk. So tell me a little bit about how do you monetize podcasting? Because another really quick story, and I'd love for you to speak on this. I have a client who is actually out of country. He's based out of Australia, and he had a health situation come up where he could not travel for his speaking engagements. Really, all he could do was podcasts, and he's was a breadwinner, but his income made a difference in their family. So he actually earned during that year where he was kind of out of commission, he earned six figures just by podcasting, and you'd never really feel it or know it. He had a rhythm and a way to do that, to monetize without overtly selling. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so there are lots of ways that you can use podcast guesting to market your different offerings. So a few of the offerings that people come to us for, one is book launches. We have many clients that come to us at different stages of their book launch. Most of the time, we encourage clients to come to us usually around at least like 9 months before. 6 months is the very latest that we suggest the client comes to us. If they want to come later than that, that's fine, but we have to make it known that there's a long lead time in podcast guesting.
I love that you
So,
said that. Can I just interject right there? Because
yeah,
speakers are the same way. They come to our agency wanting us to help them launch a book, and they're like, as soon as I get it done, well, let's start. Like, no, a year to 6 months in advance is when there's a ramp, right? That's when we start creating interest and intrigue. Um, so how how do you do that, Sam? Do you give a free gift? Because obviously you're not going to come on my show and sell your service. How do you draw people into your world in a respectful way so that those wellness experts in the business world, especially maybe who want to get ready to launch a book, whatever, ha- know, I think I want his free thing, so that then maybe I can have a conversation. Like, how do you go from being a guest to getting those calls or those opportunities without it feeling icky?
Yeah, so we just approach it the same way with any client, really. We find the value that they can offer, and it's not necessarily related to the book. It might be something unrelated, but most people, they whatever they're talking about, it's going to be related to their line of work anyway. So I think the best example I can give, we currently have a client. Her name's Dr. Maria Sophocles. She's a very, very popular and well-known doctor and gynecologist. She actually has a TED talk with 1.2 million views in total,
Nice.
called The Bedroom Gap. And she came to us at the start of the year wanting to build up hype because she has a book coming out at the end of the year. So it's fantastic timing. We've got the whole year to get her booked on shows.
Mhm.
And really, a lot of the conversation doesn't revolve around her book necessarily, but more about like her TED talk or other things that she's known for or she's spoken about in her career, and she can speak about, and she can offer a lot of value to listeners when she joins the show. So we really focus on that. And one of the benefits of her starting early is that quite early on, immediately as we started outreach, we saw success, and that meant getting her on shows early in the year. And a lot of these shows have come out or are starting to come out now, and we're obviously still way ahead of when her book comes out. But she's been very intelligent throughout this whole process, and she's leveraged the relationships that she's earned throughout this process. And she says to most hosts at the end of the show, like at the end of the interview, like, "Hey, I've got my book coming out. I'd love to come back on. It's going to be a fresh take, so like we'll have a different conversation from what we've had today, and I'll just share a little bit more about like this wider conversation that we're having." And she's done a fantastic job of that. So that's primarily how we position them. It doesn't have to be like all around the book, read this book, we'll send you a copy of the book, because most speakers who have a book, they have so much more than just the book to say, and they can also draw on information from the book. So it's more like a component of what we're talking about, but it's not like the centerpiece in it. We don't make it like the thing that we're promoting. We're still focusing on them as the expert and them giving knowledge that they can take away, and then they also have this book coming out. So it's kind of like a piece on the side, not like the main focus.
So important. So it's really more about positioning them in front of the right people,
Yeah.
and get for that expert to be third party verified, right? If I have you on my show, it's because I've done
Mhm.
research on you, or we have some form of relationship, and I'm basically endorsing you to all of my listenership who trusts me. Now they trust you. That's powerful. That's huge. And then it's about that visibility and findability piece.
Mhm.
So I believe that that's really where you can separate the pros from, I guess, the serious ones from the kick in the tires kind of wannabes in the speaking and thought leadership industry, whether they're writing a book, um, or they're a consultant, or they do want to break into speaking and corporate training. Um, Podcasts are powerful for all of that. The ones who understand that to build a business, it takes some elbow grease, and it takes some financial investment, some resource investment, some energy. It's not like, Sam, hey, you're the pro at this, right? Just do this for me, and when you get me success, I'll throw you some pennies, right? I get that's like every single day, um, And that to me is a person that's generally from the newer speakers. That's a person who really doesn't understand what it takes to be to have a serious business. If you just want to sit on some bureaus and be with a couple of non-exclusive agents, whatever, and just get thrown some things every now and then, that works for some people. Maybe they have some other big business on the side where they really can't get out there and speak 3 to 5 times per month. And that's not the major, those paychecks, those 10, 15, $20,000 paychecks are not what they're relying on. Fine, then get that commission-based model. But if you're serious and you roll up your sleeves and you treat it like a business, and I think that's really what you're talking about. They respect the tail and they're willing to put in that work. That really fabulous doctor you were just talking about, I want to take a look at her book. She is putting in work right now for 3 to 6 months down the road, maybe even a year down the road, where she might actually be attracting clients or attracting buyers to her books at that time. But she knows that she needs to invest now to be able to reap later. How often do you come across clients who understand that, and how much education do you need to put in on the front end? Or do you just not even give them the time of day if they're just like, hey, Sam, do it for me and I'll throw you something later?
Is your question about like how do I like if someone comes to me and it's like very late in the process, like they have a book coming out
Yeah, they
next
want
week,
kind of
like how do
instant results, I guess is what I'm asking. The one who's really looking for instant results versus the one who's willing to put in those laps to get to their goals.
Yeah, I have to say we're quite fortunate in the sense that we attract clients who are often quite experienced and they understand the game, they understand the situation. Sometimes we do have to explain things to a client and be like, look, if your book's coming out next week, then like this isn't the perfect strategy. However, there's also a conversation around that where it's like most people aren't just going to promote a book and then disappear. Most people who put out a book, they have a career before them and they hope to have a career after that. So it's the case of like, yes, this might be your next big book or your first book, whatever. I think it's important then to move the focus away and say like, okay, so this book has come out. You know what? Like, we can still get you on podcasts, and people can still buy the book once it's launched. Like, you don't need to build up the hype beforehand. Like, the book is going to be available. You can promote it. People then can go and buy it right away. It's not like once after the book launch, you can't talk about the book. It's not of any value. It's done. That's it. It's over. It's quite the opposite. You can still very much promote it and make sales from it. But it's also important to consider what else do you have on the horizon. Yes, maybe you do have a book launch coming out next week, but in 6 months or 9 months down the line, you have a retreat coming up. And it's like, okay, well, let's promote the book, sure, but let's also like sow the seeds for the retreat. And I think the one thing which I really have to say here is that when we are encouraging our clients to get on podcast and to promote themselves, the next step is almost always encouraging someone to sign up for their lead magnet. So the next step that we encourage isn't necessarily go buy the book, go buy this from me, go buy this, because while podcasting does accelerate that know, like, and trust factor, it doesn't always bring people to buy mode straight away. It sometimes takes a little bit more nurturing. And to ensure that the person who's listening is pulled into your network and pulled into your circle and thinks, you know what, I want more information from this person. I'd like to maybe like hear a few more things this person has to say before I proceed with them. That's perfect for lead magnets. So someone signs up, they do a quiz, they get a free ebook, they get a free video, they get something in exchange for handing over their email, and from then onwards they are in your like on your mailing list. And that's really where the magic happens, because if they're on your mailing list and you're doing your email strategy well, and then they're going to stay on there because they're interested in what you had to say. And then you constantly have the opportunity to sell them on whatever it is you have in the future. So if you have another book that comes out, they're going to know because they're on your mailing list. If you have a retreat, if you've got a new course, if you're going to go speak at an event, they're going to know about all of these things because they're on your mailing list. So often the focus isn't, oh, you've got a book coming out next week, let's just like go for that. It's like, well, what's your bigger goal as a business owner? What do you hope to achieve over the next few years? What do you have coming out, and how can we build up attention to that, or even relationships which are going to foster and encourage the results that you want over the next few years?
Oh, so important. And with podcasts, you have to be a little careful, don't you? Maybe you're talking about your new book coming out, but a lot of the audience may not even discover that show for 2 years down the road, and you already have another book coming out. So having that kind of timeless gift is forever. And then once they're in your ecosystem, then you get to be current and relevant with what's going on with you right then and there. So that was really important, what you shared right there. So I know you have the Mics to Millions podcast yourself. What are some other ways that you like to be found?
Yes, so the best place to go for more information on what I've shared today, if you want a guide on how to get yourself booked as a podcast guest, and that's a guide that breaks it down on how you can do that in 4 weeks, and there's a pitch template there, follow-up template, which you can use. You can go to podwritten.com/links, and I'll share that link with you, and you can put it in the show notes, but
Yes, we'll definitely do that. So
podwritten.com/links.
podwritten.com/LINKS links.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And there's all the information there. We've got a ton of free resources that you can use. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, Sam Break Gear. And yeah, I love chatting with people there. So either leave a comment or message me directly and we can talk. And much like you said, for those in your audience who are health and wellness podcast hosts, or you've got a podcast and you just want to see better numbers, it is geared towards health and wellness podcast hosts, but what we share, the facts that we share, and the information we share could be applicable to many hosts. We check out Mics to Millions, and yeah, you can grow your download numbers.
How helpful is LinkedIn in, let's say you bring on a new client and you're promoting them for these top 2%, 1%, 0.5% podcasts? What kind of role does their presence in LinkedIn play?
So that depends on how they use it. So a lot of our clients, health and wellness generally is quite popular on Instagram. So many of our clients come to us with big Instagram followings or big TikTok followings more than LinkedIn followings.
Mm-hmm.
So if the person doesn't really have much of a following elsewhere, but LinkedIn's their biggest platform, then it could be useful. But generally speaking, social media isn't always the as influential to a host as you might expect. While it is important and it does have some sense of credibility, hosts are definitely going to be looking more towards what you can offer as a guest. So we never really use that as one of the key points to say, hey, have this person on because they got tons of followers. Towards the end of the pitch, we might say, you know what, they've got an online audience of 40,000 and they'll happily share this with their community once this interview goes live. And we might mention something along those lines. But again, the majority of the pitch, almost all of it, will be focused around the value that they're offering. So I'd say, like, in general, it's not as influential as one might think.
That's interesting. I for getting speakers booked, the correct use of LinkedIn specifically can account for 30% of their new their new engagements. So I assumed it would be true for podcasts. It makes for podcasting, it makes sense that where they're already big would be the place probably. But what we find are the decision makers are generally in LinkedIn, but it sounds like your approach is really to kind of bypass that and go direct to the decision maker in a different way. Anyway, am I right?
Yeah, and like I said, there's a different world in health and wellness in the sense that it's very consumer focused. So the people that you're dealing with like speakers, most likely they're going to be speaking to other business professionals and executives. And potentially, maybe you do work with like those that are health and wellness focused that speak to a broader consumer audience. But certainly, with a lot of the professionals we work with, they are speaking to a broader audience of general consumers, those that want to lose weight or just improve longevity, improve mobility, and just feel happier and just live life at a higher level. So that's really like at the end of the day who we're going after. So yeah, Instagram's particularly popular for that. So is TikTok as well.
Okay, so you know the signature question of the Speak Pact show, and that is our whole premise, which is our universal pact to make the greatest impact, the greatest positive impact in this world that we can. And in your world and in my world, that is largely through the power of your voice. So, what is one kind of strategic, tactical thing that you would challenge my audience to do to maybe attract their first or another top podcast?
Just go. I know it might sound simple, but go out and pitch yourself. A lot of time, people are hesitant to do so, and maybe they might get stuck in the research phase, or they're not sure, or maybe they're a bit timid about what they're going to say. And there's a ton of reasons that you could come up with not to go off and pitch yourself and get yourself booked or start your podcast guesting journey. But as soon as you start sending those pitches, you're going to get better at it over time. You're going to develop a system and you're going to get opportunities. From those opportunities, you're going to get practice. And the more you do it, the more results you'll get and the more impact you'll have in the world and also on your business. And it's an upward spiral that creates more opportunities for you as you go on and you build out your network through podcasting and you grow your audience. So get started. Go send your first pitch if you haven't done so already.
Oh, love it. And you touched on something I just want to close with quickly, and that is you're getting practice. And what I have found is that to stay relevant, you never stop collecting data, and data is only gotten through practice, right? As you are in front of a given audience, you're learning about yourself because as you evolve, your audience evolves, and you are taking a temperature of the mood of your industry, right? There's ebbs and flows in every single industry, and the more you get your voice out there, and podcasts are the very perfect way to do that, you are never out of touch with what's actually going on in your audiences, so that you can speak to that and stay relevant. So really great advice. Thank you so much, Sam.
No, thank you for having me today. It's been such a pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun, very insightful. Please give Sam a great big thank you by posting this forward, because in your sphere of influence, there are others who can really gain from the insights that he shared today. And for our beautiful Speak Pact audience, thank you for sticking with us today. And come on back. Ciao, ciao for now.